Calls have been growing louder for a re-examination of one of its members in the age of Me Too. During Supreme Court Justice Clarence Thomas's confirmation hearings in 1991, his former colleague Anita Hill accused him of sexual harassment, saying Thomas repeatedly asked her out, refused to take no for an answer, and regularly cornered her to talk about sex.
On several occasions, Thomas told me graphically of his own sexual prowess. Because I was extremely uncomfortable talking about sex with him at all, and particularly in such a graphic way, I told him that I did not want to talk about these subjects.
This was the first time this type of sexual harassment was brought to light in such a high-profile public way. Even after this testimony, an all-white, all-male Senate committee approved Thomas's nomination following his pointed defense.
This is a circus. It's a national disgrace. And from my standpoint, as a black American, as far as I'm concerned, it is a high-tech lynching for uppity blacks who in any way deign to think for themselves, to do for themselves, to have different ideas.
What many didn't know, though, was that Anita Hill was not the only woman with a story like this to tell about Thomas. Among the facts prompting former New York Times executive editor Jill Abramson to re-examine his case in a New York Magazine piece entitled "The Case for Impeaching Clarence Thomas." Jill Abramson has been covering the story for decades. She's also a senior lecturer at Harvard. It's so good to meet you, Jill. Thanks for being here.
Thank you.
So you're arguing for a time of reckoning 27 years after the fact. Why now?
Well, why now is because of the Me Too wave of allegations. And it just struck me when Senator Gillibrand came forward and said it was time to look with new eyes at Bill Clinton's treatment of women, that's fine. And I think she's right. But I felt like the Clarence Thomas Anita Hill case was sort of patient zero of sexual harassment. So why not look at that one too?
Would you have felt the same way had you not? You wrote about this woman, Morris Smith, from
right.
who in 1999 says she was groped at a dinner by Thomas, obviously after his confirmation. She never talked about it publicly until the Access Hollywood tape, I guess, in October. You also mentioned the reason none of us ever heard of it, which I had not till I read your piece, is because Comey announced the reopening of the Clinton thing. Then, were it not for the Smith revelation, would you be arguing the same thing, that we should take another look at the Thomas situation?
Well, I think, yes, I would have. I thought, the Smith case is so important because it involves his behavior since he's been on the court.
Right.
But I found additional evidence that was not brought before the public or to the Judiciary Committee back in 1991, showing overwhelmingly that Clarence Thomas lied.
Give us an example, like what, for example?
Well, there were many people who knew at the time of the hearings that he was a habitual pornography user, and that the very characters that, we remember Anita Hill testifying about Long Dong Silver, and others, that those were precisely movies that he had talked about.
So it's not that he consumed pornography,
that's
but that he
fine.
lied about consuming pornography.
And that the fact that he was a habitual consumer and he talked endlessly about pornographic movies, it really helped bolster her credibility.
So, but if Jill, if lying is the criterion for re-examination, then you could write the exact same piece about Donald Trump, I assume, right?
But Clarence Thomas is on the highest court of the land, and he has a lifetime appointment on that court. He is not subject, as Donald Trump will be, to a judgment by voters.
Could you talk about one person still in the news without whose action likely Thomas wouldn't have been confirmed? Joe Biden, who talks a lot about how he's a champion of women's rights, I think you can say made a deal with the devil, the Republicans, all white, all men on the committee. What was that deal that caused a significant number of potential corroborators of Hill's testimony to not testify?
The deal was simply that he would not allow in any evidence concerning quote-unquote Clarence Thomas's private use of pornography.
Why?
It had to be workplace related.
But why did he cut that deal?
I think because back then, it was an all-male committee, and, there were plenty of Democrats on the committee that had problems of a sexual nature in their recent past, like Ted Kennedy.
Who was virtually silent throughout this thing.
Sat there almost with a paper bag over his head, and that, there's a feeling of, like, if we start to go there, it will just be endless.
Well, does race have any... I hadn't thought, I'm embarrassed to say about this until I read your piece, because obviously Clarence Thomas is black, Anita Hill is black.
Right.
The four women who didn't at least testify publicly,
were
one
black.
on the phone,
Yes.
were black, and it was an all-white male Judiciary
Right.
Committee. Was race part of the
Well,
decision
race
to muzzle them?
permeated the hearings, and I think once Clarence Thomas uttered those remarkable words you just played, that put the white politicians on the committee back on their heels, and it frazzled them and muzzled them in a way. They didn't want to be seen as lynching a black man up on Capitol Hill.
For people watching this who maybe weren't alive through this, who maybe don't follow the SCOTUS, the Supreme Court, as closely as you do, give us an example or two of what having a man credibly accused of sexual harassment has meant to women sitting on the court for 27, 26 years. What has he been a key vote on? That
he's been, a key vote. He's been part of, there's the razor-thin conservative majority, often 5-4 votes on the court. And by and large, Clarence Thomas has not been a friend to women's health. Even on the issue of sexual harassment itself, he was part of a majority opinion that reduced the definition of who could be sued as a supervisor.
He wouldn't be confirmed today, right? You agree with that? Or
I don't think he would have been confirmed today.
I think I read you say in an interview your end game is not you don't think he's about to be impeached for logistics.
I'm a political realist.
Okay,
Jim,
so if that's the case, then what I'm guessing, without having heard you say this, that your end game may be an Alex Kozinski kind of thing. For those who haven't heard, the appellate court judge, I think on the Ninth Circuit, resigned after being credibly accused of.
Yeah.
So is that your hope that the focus on this rises to such a level that there may be pressure on Thomas to say, I'm out of here? Is that?
Yeah, as a realist too. Clarence Thomas vowed at the point he was confirmed, he was 43 years old, that he would serve on the court for at least 43 years. So I don't actually think he will resign, but I think there should be some accountability.
I couldn't agree more. Jill, it's a pleasure to meet you.
Oh, thank you so much, Tim.
Your piece is terrific, too.
Thank you so much.
Read it in New York Magazine.